PTC ਨੈਟਵਰਕ ਦੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਜੀ। ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਖਾਸ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ 'ਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਤਾਰੁਫ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਅਹਿਮ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਰਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਾਣ ਪਛਾਣ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਸ਼ਤਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਗੱਲ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੇਗੀ ਔਰ ਕੁਝ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੇਗਾ ਉਸ ਪੱਧਰ ਤੋਂ ਆ ਕੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੰਬੀ ਚੌੜੀ ਤਾਰੀਫ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਸਿੱਧਾ ਉਸ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ को ਲੈ ਕੇ ਚੱਲਦਾ। ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹਾਂ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਵੂਮਨ ਅਫੇਅਰ ਦੇ ਆਫਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਔਰ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਅਸਿਸਟੈਂਟ ਸੈਕਟਰੀ ਜਨਰਲ ਆਫ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ, ਡਿਪਟੀ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਕਟਿਵ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਰ UN ਵੂਮਨ ਦੇ ਨੇ ਲక్ష్ਮੀ ਮੁਰਦੇਸ਼ਵਰ ਪੁਰੀ। ਲక్ష్ਮੀ ਜੀ, ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ ਆਪਣਾ ਵਕਤ ਕੱਢਣ ਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸੋ ਮਚ ਫॉर दैट।
ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬੜੀ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ।
और लक्ष्मी जी ने इतने अपना वक्त कढ़िया उत्थे इस इंटरव्यू दे विच असी एक नहीं दो जर्नलिस्ट मौजूद हाँ। इंडियन पैनोरमा दे एडिटर ते डायरेक्टर प्रोफेसर इंद्रजीत सलूजा साडे विचकार मौजूद रहेंगे। सलूजा साहब, थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम आल्सो।
बहुत खुशी हुई जी।
और इस तो पहला कि सलूजा साहब अपने सवालों की बुछाड़ लैके आउण, लक्ष्मी जी का इतिहास जिहड़ा आ वो पंजाब दे नाल इन्हां दे प्यार मुहब्बत दे नाल भी जुड़दा है, करियर दे नाल भी जुड़दा है। इंडिया के कैबिनेट मिनिस्टर हरदीप सिंह पुरी होना दे धर्म पत्नी ने, बीइंग द यंगेस्ट डिप्लोमैट, आई थिंक बहुत वड्डे अपॉर्चुनिटीज मिलदियां ने लेगेसी क्रिएट करन दी, एंड यू हैव डन अ लॉट ऑफ वर्क। बट आई गेस सब तो इंपॉर्टेंट चीज जिहड़ी इन्हां दे करियर दे शुरुआत दी असीं गिणांगे, एंड यू क्रिएट अ लेगेसी फ्रॉम दैट। जथेदार संतोख सिंह होरां दे नाल होर बहुत सारे वड्डे आगूआं दे नाल रल के पाकिस्तान नूं जाण वाला सिखां दा पहला जथा जिहड़ा तुसीं उहदे च इन्वॉल्व सी
जी। I was the liaison officer. I was Under Secretary Pakistan at that time.
So thoda jiha dasso kehda saal si?
हाँ जी, I think it was 1980, and that was the first Sikh jatha that went to Pakistan, and I was accompanied. It was an 11-member jatha, jathedars, and I was accompanying them as the officer in charge. And then, of course, there are interesting tales to tell, but I was really moved by our visits to Nankana Sahib and Panja Sahib, which are so sacred to the founding of the Sikh faith. And, of course, I also visited the original homes of my in-laws, father-in-law, in Rawalpindi and Peshawar. So it was both a personal journey and a professional breakthrough. But of course, you know, there were some interesting twists in the sense that General Zia at that time was surprised that a woman should be the liaison officer, and he had not included my name in the list of people who were invited to meet him. So Ambassador Natwar Singh, at the High Commissioner Natwar Singh at that time, said no, but she is the liaison officer, she will accompany. So I went along and he took me in his car. We went in, and when General Zia saw me, he was taken aback, and then, but he did adab and then moved on. But within 10 minutes, I had one of the waiters coming to me and saying, Begum Sahiba, aapke liye wait kar rahi hai wahan par. So on the other side of the garden, Mrs. Zia was waiting with tea laid out for me, and she was originally from Chandni Chowk in Delhi. So she discussed about so we discussed about my in-laws from Pakistan originally, and what is now Pakistan, and she discussed about her life in Chandni.
There was some nostalgia there.
But you know, that was a very difficult choice I had to make. Should I stay on as a liaison officer? I should, because so that was the first challenge, to professional challenge to gender equality. You know,
you've been separated.
Yes.
आपको अलग किया गया मर्दों से, और वजन खाने में आप बैठे।
First of all, not being invited, and then when I did go, then being separated, segregated.
Despite the fact that you were supposed to be leading,
exactly, and I was supposed to be, you know, witnessing, being part of this dialogue. This was a kind of diplomatic dialogue that had been started. So it was one of those very interesting moments in Indo-Pak relations.
What is the role of UN women when it comes to their emancipation, when it comes to ending the bias against them, when it comes to granting them their rights as human beings?
Absolutely.
So what, in short, can you tell our readers about the role of UN women? And then I'll come to the other question, how you were implementing that particular policy.
Okay. So UN Women was founded in 2011. It was launched in 2011 in January, and I joined UN Women in March.
Okay.
So I've been with this institution, building this institution right from the beginning in the leadership team. And it has been, and it is meant to be, the only global advocate and champion for gender equality, women's empowerment, and women's human rights in every way and in every area. So what does that mean? For us, it means that international agreements, norms, and standards and commitments are made by governments to uphold and advance gender equality and women's empowerment norms and standards. And that has been, I would also link up to your later question about what's my contribution. That has been UN Women's and my own greatest contribution. Because we have today in place a historic gender equality compact on the part of the international community, which is reflected in the Beijing Platform for Action being not only recommitted to, but also strongly, taken forward and updated. Similarly, the UN's development agenda, Sustainable Development Agenda, Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, has made gender equality a central enabler and beneficiary. And there is a goal, SDG 5, Sustainable Development Goal 5, on achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls.
Okay.
So that goal is something that we really, and I personally, really worked, mobilized, worked, UN Women conceptualized, then we mobilized all member states, including India, to strongly support and take forward. And that goal is about ending violence against women, all forms of violence, child marriage, FGM, all the trafficking, and harmful practices, including what would honor killing, sex selection,
women
everything,
trafficking, etc., human trafficking, women trafficking.
But apart from that, all harmful practices, including those that we have, including in India, South Asia. So this is something that is very strongly a target, sustainable development target. Similarly, ending all forms of discrimination in law and practice. Women's economic empowerment, equal access, ownership and control over resources, productive resources. Similarly, parity in voice, participation and leadership in public life, economic life, political life. That means in parliament, in the executive, in the judiciary, in law enforcement, in public service, in corporations, everywhere, right? And then it also is very importantly about universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. Women having control over their bodies and their reproductive role. And then it's also very importantly, the goal recognizes that women have to bear a disproportionate share of unpaid care and domestic work. This is really frontier pushing. 2/3 of such work is done by women.
Yes.
So, and in places like India, it's even higher.
And that's without compensation.
And without compensation, and also with heavy cost, opportunity cost on education, on income and employment, economic empowerment. So it's one of those factors. So valuing that, reducing that, redistributing that, and provisioning that. So this goal is something that really I personally worked very hard to attain, and that's something that I count as one of my strongest legacy. This whole gender equality in climate change, in peace and security, in the new urban agenda. You know, now my husband is the urban affairs minister, but we have been advocating even before that with the government of India on engendering the smart cities program, for example, and all the urban programs that they are doing. And Prime Minister Modi is very much, supporting the gender equality program and engendering of all his key India, New India campaigns like Skills India and so on.
As long as we are talking about India, ਇਹ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਹੈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਕਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਘੱਟੋ ਘੱਟ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਔਰਤ ਦੇ ਅਗੇਂਸਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਾਇਸ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਦੀਆਂ ਪੁਰਾਣਾ ਆ। ਤਾਂ 8 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੈ, 7 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ, 6 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇੱਕਦਮ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ, ਬਟ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਐਫਰਟਸ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਗਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ। ਸੋ what I need to understand from you is Punjabis have earned a lot of fame everywhere for their hard work, for their enthusiasm for life, but
and entrepreneurship.
Yes, but Punjabis have earned that fame. We are known across India at least, and across globe also for our female field side. That attitude is just not changing despite a lot of work by local organizations. बहुत कुछ किया जा रहा है पर असर नहीं होता। साडे डेटास दे विच चेंज बहुत मिनिस्कल आ रहे हैं। There are changes, we celebrate them. Could be 10, 12 girls rising every per 1,000. But still, there's no equality, whereas globally, especially in Western countries, the number of women is higher. How tough do you see your work at ground level in Punjab, or whether it's in Africa?
Well, I think you mentioned cultural and social norms and patriarchy.
Yes.
And that is critical. And that is why we believe in movement building. And that's why I think even Government of India, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, unless you start creating new social norms and cultural norms around the valuing of the girl child, that she is of equal value. And also you dismantle all the patriarchal concepts and institutions that go with that devaluing of the girl child and aversion to the girl child, you're not going to get any change. So movement building, आंदोलन खड़ा करना।
मैं वही जानना चाह रहा हूँ कि आप जमीन पे जब जाते हैं,
हाँ,
how tough is it?
It is tough, but आंदोलन हो रहा है and कर सकते हैं, and you can do it also through the village councils.
Yes,
because we have been working, and UN Women has been working in India with the village women councillors and Jilla Parishad councillors, because they have got elected on a quota, because of the Panchayati Raj bill. Today you have 1.5 million elected local councillors, women. And initially many of them were, farzi.
Just rubber stamps.
Rubber stamp.
Yes.
But what we have tried to do is to work with them, to train them to govern, to demand
their
rights, and to demand public services from authorities, and also implementation of the programs that have been approved, the money that is being deployed, that to be spent on the programs that have been approved. So this has been a very successful program, our governance program, in support of. So one has to work in several different ways. Women's economic empowerment is the other area. Access to energy and water and sanitation. I think these are really important missions, which will also, but it has to be consciously, you have to target gender equality and women's empowerment when you do these programs. And equally, these programs will benefit gender equality and women's empowerment. Jan Dhan program, for example, you know, access to finance. Women's, you know, disadvantage in terms of owning property, land. In Punjab, this is very much the case.
Despite having the law. Despite having the law.
Yes. So how do you push and incentivize, you know, the society to really put value on that and also disincentivize discrimination? So this is something that will, so laws, policies, measures and their effective implementation, movement building is what we really, building up a strong women's movement. And I think youth, the youth of Punjab, the youth of India, men and women have to be part of this. And we have, UN Women has really been very successful in some of these movement building efforts. On the youth side, we have what is called the LEAPS program, Leadership, Empowerment, Economic Empowerment, Action to End Violence Against Young Women, and partnership with Young Women's Organization, Young Men's Organization, and intergenerational dialogue. So that's the youth part. And then we have also been very successful with our global campaign called He for She. Men and boys have to be made champions of gender equality. Unless they assume that mantle, we are not going to see change. So women, of course, must stand up and claim. And I have seen that in India, we still have women transmitting harmful traditions and practices which are patriarchal and which are discriminatory and oppressive of
That's
other
why we
women.
end up saying aurat ki kuch hai.
Exactly. So firstly, they must claim. And that's why I think women's movement and social norm transformation by women themselves is important. But men and boys have to be taught right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's where the problem is. Professor Ruja, you will agree, social analysis says only the men who have been brought up by strong women or larger number of women in the family than men are sensitive to feminist issues.
Or have daughters.
Or have
should
daughters.
Have. Should
or maybe later in the life.
Yeah.
But जिन लोगों की जिन्हां दी पैदाइश जिहड़ी है उन्हां दे पैदाइश तो लैके जवान होण तक बंदे ज्यादा आले दुआले रहे ने औरतां घट रहीआं ने उन्हां नूं अकल आनी बड़ी मुश्किल है सो ओदा सोल्यूशन की करोगे बहुत वड्डी गिनती उन्हां लोगां दी है
No, absolutely. You know, that's why I'm saying that it has to begin when you're a boy. You know, every mother and father must bring up their children in a gender equal way. Boys must learn in their textbooks, in the way that teachers teach them, how this is not about women and girls are not lower in dignity. It's not that they are, you know, the other day Prime Minister Modi said in his, at this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, he talked about how, he says, you know, everybody in the house leaves the woman to do all the cleaning work. Why? It should be each one of our responsibility to do that. So it's that kind of new culture of respecting the labor, respecting the dignity and equal rights
of
women in the family. Essential part of education. It's also important that about, you know, violence, you know, ending violence against women, prevention, protection, prosecution of perpetrators, and provision of multi-sectoral services. In all of that, again, changing mindsets, educating right from the beginning. But also, you're right, we are now dealing with generations of people who have grown up on a gender unequal basis, okay, and have mindsets that are with gender stereotypes. So we need to change that, and in order to change that, we have to also work with them. And we have been working with them. We have, and you know, 90% of the world is governed, headed by men leaders. So we have gone around the world to make those men leaders, he for she, and they lead from the front. And then we have also worked with, you were asking about Africa, we have worked with tribal leaders, you know, who are very patriarchal, but to convert them to advocating and championing this. Absolutely, but it has been successful. You know, so we are, and faith is another important. You know, you're talking, when I went to Nankana Sahib, and when you listen to the beginning of Sikhism and also its evolution, women were always seen as equal.
Equal, yes.
And then what has happened now? So it's the same with most religion. In Hinduism, we worship women, Lakshmi, Saraswati, goddesses. You know, it's one of the few religions where goddesses are, you know.
So Hinduism worships, but Hindus don't.
No, but
somebody quick.
No, Hindus also worship. But, you know, we idolize on one side, and on the other side, we devalue, you know, the girl child when she's born.
In the Hindu religion, it is the goddesses that give. Goddesses that, you know, power, wealth, everything.
Everything.
What do the men gods do?
Well, they're supposed to
I hope you are not looking at that scenario that men don't do anything. It's the women only who do everything.
We are looking at a gender equal world. So it's not about creating a UN men.
Funny enough, New York pink tax laganda hai. As a woman, if you buy cosmetics, you pay more tax than what I pay as a man.
In fact, we have, it's interesting that you mentioned New York as one of the most liberal cities. We are one of the first UN organizations to have an MOU with the city of New York. And we have a partnership program with them on all aspects of gender equality and women's empowerment.